At 35,000 feet, the captain's heart suddenly stopped. The co-pilot screamed for help. Passengers feared the worst. Then a nurse in seat 12B jumped up and ran to the cockpit. She was exhausted from work, desperate for rest. But her training took over. She had minutes to save him. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The airplane hummed quietly as it flew through the clouds at 35,000 feet. Inside, passengers read books, watched movies, and slept in their seats. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed safe. In seat 12B, near the middle of the plane, sat a young woman named Emma Martinez. She looked out the window with tired eyes. The clouds below looked soft like cotton. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Emma was 29 years old. She worked as a nurse in the cardiac unit at City Hospital. For the past 5 years, she had worked with heart patients. She knew how to save lives when hearts stopped beating. She knew CPR. She knew how to use emergency equipment. She was very good at her job. But today, Emma was not working. Today, she was just a passenger. She was flying from New York to Los Angeles to visit her mother. She had worked 3 long shifts in a row before this flight. Each shift was 12 hours. She was exhausted. Her body was tired. Her mind was tired. I just want to sleep, Emma thought to herself. Just a few hours where nobody needs me. She had left her nurse uniform at home. She had left her hospital badge at home. She had left her stethoscope at home. For this one trip, she wanted to be just Emma. Not Nurse Emma. Not the person everyone called when there was an emergency. Just a normal person taking a normal flight. Emma thought about the past week at the hospital. It had been difficult. 3 patients had coded during her shifts. One of them didn't make it despite everything she tried. She had worked until her hands were shaking and her back was aching. She had missed lunch breaks. She had stayed late to finish paperwork. She had given everything she had. And now, sitting in this airplane seat, she felt empty. Drained. She needed this vacation. She needed time to remember who she was outside of the hospital walls. The flight attendant came by with drinks. Emma asked for water. She drank it slowly and looked around the cabin. There were about 200 people on the plane. Some were businessmen in suits typing on laptops. Some were families with children playing games on tablets. Some were elderly couples holding hands. Everyone had somewhere to go. Everyone trusted that this flight would be safe. Emma noticed a young mother struggling with a crying baby a few rows ahead. The woman looked stressed and tired. Emma felt sympathy for her. She knew how hard it was to be responsible for someone else's well-being. That mother was probably exhausted too, but she couldn't take a break. Babies don't care if you're tired. Emma closed her eyes again. The steady hum of the engines was soothing. Maybe she could actually sleep on this flight. Maybe she could have 5 hours of peace before landing in Los Angeles. In the front of the plane, behind the locked cockpit door, sat 2 pilots. Captain David Chen was 52 years old. He had been flying planes for 25 years. He had flown this route from New York to Los Angeles hundreds of times. He was experienced. He was skilled. He was reliable. Captain Chen had woken up that morning feeling a bit off. There was a strange tightness in his chest. But he had ignored it. Probably just stress, he thought. Or maybe he had eaten something that didn't agree with him. He had a physical exam scheduled for next month. He would mention it to his doctor then. Next to him sat the co-pilot, Tom Wilson. Tom was 35 years old. He was still learning to become a captain himself. He respected Captain Chen very much. They had flown together many times before. They worked well as a team. Beautiful day for flying, Captain Chen said, looking at the clear blue sky ahead. Yes, sir, Tom replied. Weather looks perfect all the way to LA. No storms anywhere on the radar. Captain Chen smiled. This was going to be an easy flight. No storms. No turbulence. Just smooth sailing through the sky. He reached for his coffee and took a sip. The coffee was bitter, but it helped him stay alert. They had been in the air for about 2 hours. They were somewhere over Ohio, making good time. Tom was reviewing their fuel calculations when he heard a strange sound next to him. It was a gasp, like someone trying to breathe but couldn't. Tom looked over quickly. Captain Chen's face had gone pale. His eyes were wide with surprise and fear. His right hand was gripping his chest. Captain. Tom said, concern rising in his voice. Are you okay? Captain Chen tried to speak, but no words came out. The pain in his chest was overwhelming. It felt like an elephant was sitting on him. His left arm went completely numb. He knew what this was. He had learned about it in his aviation medical training. This was a heart attack. Captain Chen. Tom said louder. Talk to me. But Captain Chen couldn't talk. The pain was too intense. His vision started to blur. The cockpit instruments in front of him became fuzzy. He tried to reach for the controls, but his hand wouldn't obey his brain. His whole body felt heavy. Then, without any warning, everything changed. Captain Chen's eyes rolled back. His head dropped forward onto his chest. His hands fell limply to his sides. He slumped in his seat, completely unconscious. Captain! Tom shouted. Captain Chen. There was no answer. Captain Chen was completely still. His body was limp in the seat. He wasn't moving. He wasn't responding. The only sound was the steady drone of the airplane engines. Tom's heart started racing. His hands began to shake. He had been trained for many emergency situations. Engine failure. Bad weather. Equipment problems. Hijacking scenarios. But he had never trained for this. He had never imagined that his captain would suddenly collapse during a flight. Oh God, Tom whispered. Please, no. Not this. He reached over and shook Captain Chen's shoulder firmly. Captain. Can you hear me? Captain Chen, wake up. Nothing. No response at all. The captain's head just lolled to the side when Tom shook him. Tom's mind was racing. He was now the only conscious pilot on this airplane. He had 200 people depending on him. He had to keep the plane flying safely. But he also had to help his captain. He couldn't do both at the same time. His training kicked in. First priority, fly the plane. Second priority, get help. Tom pressed the button to call the lead flight attendant. His voice cracked as he spoke into the intercom. We need help in the cockpit right now. Medical emergency. The captain is unconscious. I repeat, medical emergency in the cockpit. In the cabin, senior flight attendant Sarah Kim heard the call. Her stomach dropped. In 16 years of flying, she had dealt with sick passengers many times. She had helped people with anxiety attacks. She had assisted elderly passengers who felt dizzy. She had even helped deliver a baby once. But never a sick pilot. Never an unconscious captain. This was every flight attendant's worst nightmare. Sarah put down the coffee pot she was holding and rushed toward the cockpit. She knocked on the reinforced door 3 times quickly. This was the emergency knock that signaled something was seriously wrong. Tom opened it immediately. His face was white with fear. Sweat was already forming on his forehead. What happened? Sarah asked, stepping into the tiny cockpit. I don't know, Tom said, his voice shaking. We were just flying normally. Then he grabbed his chest and collapsed. I think it's his heart. It happened so fast. Sarah looked at Captain Chen slumped in his seat. She had basic first aid training, like all flight attendants. The airline required them to recertify every year. She knew how to check for breathing and pulse. She knew basic CPR. But she had never actually had to use it in a real emergency like this. She leaned over Captain Chen and put her fingers on his neck, trying to find the carotid artery pulse point. She pressed gently, then harder, moving her fingers slightly to make sure she was in the right spot. Nothing. She felt nothing. She put her cheek close to his mouth and nose, trying to feel any breath at all. She watched his chest, looking for the rise and fall of breathing. Nothing. No breath. No movement. He has no pulse, Sarah said, her voice shaking. He's not breathing. I think his heart has stopped. Tom felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. What do we do? He asked. He was trying to stay calm, but panic was rising in his chest like a wave. He was now the only pilot. He had to fly the plane. He had to keep 200 people safe. He had to navigate. He had to communicate with air traffic control. But his captain was dying right next to him, and he couldn't help. I'll start CPR, Sarah said. But as she looked at the captain's seat, she realized the problem immediately. The cockpit was tiny. The captain was strapped tightly into his chair with the shoulder harness and lap belt. He was surrounded by controls and instruments and switches on all sides. There was barely room for him to sit, let alone room for someone to do CPR. She couldn't get him out of the seat. If they unbuckled him and tried to pull him out, his body might hit controls and switches. They could accidentally shut off important systems. They could damage something critical. It was too dangerous. She would have to try to do CPR right there in the seat. Sarah unbuckled the captain's harness and positioned herself as best she could. She put her hands on his chest, one on top of the other, and pushed. But the angle was all wrong. She was reaching across from the side. She couldn't get her shoulders over his chest. She couldn't push straight down the way CPR was supposed to be done. She tried anyway. She pressed her hands on Captain Chen's chest and pushed with all her strength. But the position was awkward. She wasn't strong enough. The compressions weren't deep enough. She could tell she wasn't really helping. She had practiced CPR on mannequins during training, but this was completely different. The mannequin had been lying flat on the floor. The mannequin had been positioned perfectly. This was nothing like that. After just 1 minute, Sarah's arms were already aching. She was breathing hard. Sweat was running down her face. Get the AED. Tom shouted, remembering the automated external defibrillator they had on board. The AED was a machine that could analyze the heart rhythm and deliver an electric shock to restart it. Another flight attendant, Marcus, appeared at the cockpit door. Sarah had pressed her call button to summon help. Marcus took one look at the scene and his eyes went wide. Get the emergency medical kit and the AED, Sarah told him, never stopping her compressions. Run. Marcus ran. He knew where the emergency equipment was stored. Every flight attendant had to memorize its location. He grabbed the red medical kit and the AED machine and sprinted back to the cockpit. Sarah was still trying to do compressions, but her technique was getting worse as she tired. Her arms were shaking. She knew she wasn't doing it right, but what choice did she have? Tom grabbed the radio. He had to notify air traffic control. This was a priority emergency. Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Flight 428. We have a medical emergency. The captain is in cardiac arrest. Requesting immediate clearance to divert to nearest suitable airport. The air traffic controller's voice came back quickly. Even through the radio, Tom could hear the tension. Flight 428, Roger. Understand Captain, medical emergency. Stand by for vectors. What is your souls on board and fuel remaining? 212 souls on board, Tom replied, his voice steadier now as training took over. Fuel is 14,000 pounds. 4 hours endurance. Flight 428, you are cleared to divert to Chicago O'Hare International. Turn right heading 090. Descend and maintain 15,000 feet. Emergency crews are being notified. Right to 090, descend to 15,000, Flight 428, Tom acknowledged. He began turning the aircraft and started their descent. Chicago was still about 35 minutes away. 35 minutes while the captain's brain was without oxygen. Every minute without oxygen killed brain cells. After 4 to 6 minutes, permanent brain damage started. They were already past that point. 35 minutes seemed like an eternity. Tom's hands moved automatically across the controls. Set new heading. Adjust throttles. Start descent. Monitor speed. Check instruments. Part of his brain was flying the plane. But another part was screaming in panic, watching his captain die. He forced himself to focus. He had to make an announcement to the passengers. They needed to know what was happening. He picked up the PA microphone and tried to keep his voice steady. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the co-pilot speaking from the cockpit. We are experiencing a medical emergency that requires us to land immediately in Chicago instead of Los Angeles. I need everyone to remain calm and stay in your seats with your seatbelts fastened. If there is a doctor, nurse, paramedic, or anyone with advanced medical training on board, please identify yourself to a flight attendant right away. This is urgent. In the cabin, passengers looked at each other with worried faces. The mood changed immediately. People stopped reading. They turned off their movies. Everyone was listening now. Everyone was scared. A medical emergency serious enough to divert the flight. That only happened in extreme situations. Someone must be dying. In seat 12B, Emma heard the announcement clearly. Her eyes snapped open. Her body tensed. Medical emergency, she thought. Advanced medical training needed urgently. Her nursing instincts kicked in immediately. She knew what those words meant. Somewhere on this plane, someone was in serious trouble. Someone needed help. Someone was probably dying. But then her exhaustion crashed back over her. She had just worked 3 12-hour shifts. She had given everything she had at the hospital. She had finally sat down. Finally relaxed. Finally stopped being responsible for everything. Emma looked down at her hands. They were nurses' hands. Strong hands that had done CPR hundreds of times. Skilled hands that had started thousands of IVs. Hands that had saved lives. But she was so tired. So incredibly tired. Someone else will help, she told herself. This is a big plane. There must be a doctor somewhere. Someone else can handle this. I need to rest. I deserve to rest. She looked out the window, trying to ignore the voice in her head that was telling her to stand up. The voice that reminded her of her oath. The voice that said nurses help people, always, no matter what. No, Emma thought firmly. I'm off duty. I'm on vacation. Someone else will volunteer. They don't need me. But even as she thought this, she felt guilt twisting in her stomach like a knife. She listened as flight attendants moved through the aisles quickly, their voices urgent. Is anyone a doctor? Is anyone a nurse? Do we have any paramedics on board? Emma waited. She listened. Surely someone would respond. Any minute now, someone would stand up and say they were a doctor. But no one did. The seconds ticked by. The flight attendants' voices became more desperate. Please, if anyone has medical training, we need you right now. This is a life-or-death emergency. Life or death. Emma closed her eyes. She thought about the patient she had lost last week. A 58-year-old man who had coded in the ICU. She had done everything right. Perfect CPR. All the correct medications. The full protocol. But sometimes, despite everything, people still died. His family had been devastated. His wife had cried and cried. Emma had gone home that night and cried too. She had questioned whether she was good enough. Whether she had missed something. Whether she could have done more. And now, someone else was dying on this plane. Someone's husband, maybe. Someone's father. Someone who mattered to people. And she was sitting here doing nothing. Emma thought about what her mentor, Dr. Patricia Walsh, had told her during her first year of nursing school. It was after a particularly difficult clinical rotation where Emma had questioned whether she was cut out for this profession. Dr. Walsh had said, "Emma, being a nurse isn't just a job you clock in and out of. It's not something you do from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then forget about. It's who you are, in your bones, in your soul. When you see someone suffering, when you see someone dying, you can't ignore it. You can't walk away. Because if you can walk away, if you can choose not to help when you have the skills to save someone, then maybe you shouldn't be a nurse at all." Those words had stayed with Emma for 5 years. They had guided her through countless difficult shifts. Through moments when she wanted to quit. Through times when the job seemed too hard. And now those words were echoing in her head, louder and louder. Being a nurse is who you are. You can't walk away. If you can walk away, maybe you shouldn't be a nurse at all. Emma opened her eyes. She looked at her hands again. These weren't just regular hands. These were nurses' hands. Healers' hands. Hands that had pulled people back from death's door. She thought about the Hippocratic Oath, the promise she had made when she graduated nursing school: "I will practice my profession with conscience and dignity. The health of my patient will be my first consideration. The health of my patient will be my first consideration. Not during work hours. Not when it's convenient. Not when I feel like it. Always. The health of the patient comes first. Always." Emma took a deep breath. She knew what she had to do. She had always known. The tiredness didn't matter. Her vacation didn't matter. What mattered was that someone needed help, and she had the skills to provide it. She stood up. "I'm a nurse." Emma called out, her voice clear and strong. "I'm a cardiac intensive care nurse. I can help." The flight attendant who had been searching the nearby rows turned immediately. The relief on her face was instant and profound. "Thank you," she breathed. "Please, come with me quickly. It's the captain. His heart has stopped." Emma followed her toward the front of the plane. Her exhaustion vanished, replaced by sharp focus. Her training took over. Her mind shifted into emergency mode, the mode she had practiced thousands of times. As they walked quickly up the aisle, other passengers watched with worried, hopeful faces. Some reached out to touch Emma's arm as she passed, as if her presence alone could save the situation. An elderly woman whispered, "God bless you." A young man said, "Thank you." Emma didn't respond. She was already running through protocols in her head. Cardiac arrest. Check pulse. Check breathing. Start CPR if needed. Get the AED. Establish 4 access if possible. Administer epinephrine. Continue CPR until return of spontaneous circulation or until advanced help arrives. She reached the cockpit and immediately assessed the scene with trained eyes. The captain was slumped in his seat, his head tilted forward, his face a grayish-blue color. A flight attendant was trying to do chest compressions, but Emma could see immediately that the positioning was all wrong. The compressions were shallow and ineffective. The co-pilot was in the right seat, flying the plane, his face tight with stress and fear. The cockpit was tiny and cramped. Medical equipment was scattered on every available surface. This was bad. Very bad. But Emma had trained for bad. She had worked in intensive care for 5 years. She had seen every kind of cardiac emergency. She had run codes in hallways, in bathrooms, in parking lots. She knew how to work in difficult conditions. "I'm Emma Martinez, cardiac ICU nurse from City Hospital," she said quickly and clearly. "How long has he been down?" "Maybe 6 or 7 minutes now," Sarah said, breathing hard from her efforts. "He just suddenly grabbed his chest and collapsed. No warning. 6 or 7 minutes. That was already too long without effective CPR. But it wasn't hopeless. Not yet." Emma's training took over completely now. All the exhaustion, all the doubt, all the reluctance disappeared. She was Nurse Emma now. And Nurse Emma knew exactly what to do. "Stop compressions for a moment," Emma said calmly but firmly. She needed to assess properly before continuing. Sarah stopped and stepped back, grateful to let someone more qualified take over. Emma moved quickly but carefully into position. She checked the captain's carotid pulse, pressing firmly on his neck. Nothing. No pulse at all. She put her hand on his chest, feeling for any movement. Nothing. She looked at his face. The blue-gray color, the slack jaw, the complete absence of consciousness. This was full cardiac arrest. "We need to recline his seat as far back as possible," Emma said. "I need better access for CPR." Tom quickly reached over and adjusted the seat controls. The captain's seat tilted back, giving Emma better access to his chest. "Good," Emma said. "Where's the AED?" "Right here," Marcus said, holding up the red and white device. "Okay, I'm going to do proper CPR while you set up the AED," Emma directed. "Everyone else, step back and give me room." Emma positioned herself over the captain. She placed the heel of her right hand in the center of his chest, right over the sternum. She placed her left hand on top of her right hand, interlacing her fingers. She straightened her arms, positioning her shoulders directly over her hands. This was the correct position. This was how CPR was supposed to be done. Emma began compressions. She pushed down hard, compressing the chest at least 2 inches deep. She counted in her head, maintaining a rate of at least 100 compressions per minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This was real CPR. Effective CPR. She could feel the chest compressing properly under her hands. She was manually pumping blood through the captain's body, forcing circulation to continue even though his heart had stopped. 30 compressions. Then Emma grabbed the bag valve mask from the medical kit. She tilted the captain's head back to open his airway, placed the mask over his mouth and nose, and squeezed the bag twice, forcing air into his lungs. She watched his chest rise with each breath. Good. The airway was open. Oxygen was getting in. Back to compressions. 30 more. Hard and fast. 1, 2, 3, 4. Marcus had the AED ready. "Where do the pads go?" he asked. "One on the upper right chest, one on the lower left side," Emma said, never stopping her compressions. "Make sure they're on bare skin." They tore open the captain's shirt, buttons flying. Marcus placed the sticky electrode pads on the captain's chest exactly where Emma had instructed. "Stop compressions," the AED's automated voice said. "Analyzing heart rhythm. Do not touch the patient." Everyone froze. The machine was checking if the captain's heart had any electrical activity that could be shocked back into a normal rhythm. The wait seemed to last forever. Emma watched the AED screen, hoping for good news. "Shock advised," the machine announced. Charging. Stand clear of patient. That was actually good news. It meant the heart had some electrical activity. It meant there was something to work with. Everyone clear, Emma ordered. She looked around to make sure no one was touching the captain or the metal parts of the seat. Clear. She pressed the flashing shock button. The captain's body jerked as 200 joules of electricity shot through his heart. The muscles contracted violently for a second. Resume CPR, the AED instructed immediately. Emma was already moving. She went right back to compressions. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. The rhythm was burned into her muscle memory from thousands of hours of training and practice. Do you have epinephrine in that medical kit? Emma asked, never stopping her compressions. Sarah dug through the kit. Yes. I see it here. I need to start in 4, Emma said. I need to give him medication. Can someone take over compressions for a minute? I'll do it, Marcus said. He was younger and stronger than Sarah. Emma quickly showed him the proper hand position and rhythm. Push hard and fast, Emma instructed. At least 2 inches deep. Keep your arms straight. Use your body weight, not just your arm strength. Count in your head to keep the rhythm steady. Marcus took over. His compressions weren't quite as good as Emma's, but they were adequate. Emma worked quickly. She grabbed the 4 supplies from the medical kit. Catheter, alcohol swab, tourniquet, tape, 4 tubing, saline flush. Everything she needed was there. She found a vein in the captain's left forearm. Even in these awful conditions, even with the plane shaking slightly, even with adrenaline pumping through her own body, Emma's hands were steady. She had done this procedure thousands of times. She could do it in her sleep. She tied the tourniquet above the elbow. She swabbed the skin with alcohol. She held the catheter at the correct angle, inserted it smoothly into the vein, and saw the flash of blood that confirmed she was in. She advanced the catheter, removed the needle, connected the 4 tubing, and secured everything with tape. The whole process took less than 90 seconds. For access established, Emma announced. Good job, Marcus. Keep going. She drew up the epinephrine dose from the medical kit. 1 milligram. The standard dose for cardiac arrest. She pushed it through the 4, followed by a flush of saline to make sure the medication got into the bloodstream. Epinephrine administered, Emma said. She looked at the small clock on the cockpit instrument panel. She needed to track timing for medications. I'm taking back over, Emma told Marcus. She resumed compressions, settling back into her rhythm. 30 and 2. 30 and 2. Never stopping. Never slowing down. Tom was coordinating with air traffic control while all this was happening. His voice was amazingly calm considering his captain was dying next to him. Flight 428, how many souls on board? The controller asked. 212 souls, Flight 428, Tom responded. Emma heard this and her chest tightened. 212 people. All depending on the pilots to get them safely on the ground. And one of those pilots was unconscious, his heart stopped, his life hanging by a thread. She pushed harder on the captain's chest. She would not let him die. Not today. Not on her watch. Chicago approach in 25 minutes, Tom announced to the cockpit. 25 minutes. Emma would have to keep doing CPR for 25 more minutes. Her arms were already starting to ache. But she had done longer. She had once done CPR for 45 minutes on a patient in the ICU. She could do this. 2 minutes passed. The AED analyzed again. Shock advised, it announced. They delivered another shock. Emma resumed compressions immediately. Another dose of epinephrine. More breaths with the bag valve mask. More compressions. The cycle continued. The flight attendants had updated the passengers. Everyone knew what was happening now. The captain was in cardiac arrest. A nurse was trying to save his life. The plane was diverting to Chicago for an emergency landing. In the cabin, people were crying. Some were praying. Many were holding hands with strangers, united by fear and hope. Emma blocked it all out. She focused only on the captain. On her hands on his chest. On the rhythm of compressions. On keeping blood flowing to his brain. "Come on," she whispered as she worked. "Come on, Captain. Stay with me. Don't give up. Another 2 minutes. Another shock. More epinephrine. More CPR." Emma's shoulders burned. Sweat ran down her back. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. And then, after what felt like an eternity but was actually about 12 minutes of CPR, Emma felt something change under her hands. The captain's chest moved on its own. Just slightly. Just one small, gasping breath. Emma stopped compressions immediately and checked his carotid pulse with her fingers. There. Faint, but there. A pulse. "I've got a pulse." Emma shouted. His heart is beating on its own. The relief in the cockpit was overwhelming. Sarah started crying. Marcus let out a huge breath he'd been holding. Even Tom's shoulders relaxed slightly. But Emma knew they weren't out of danger yet. Not even close. The captain was still unconscious. His breathing was weak and irregular. His color was still terrible. He had return of spontaneous circulation, which was good, but he was critically unstable. His heart could stop again at any moment. "We need to keep supporting him," Emma said. She continued giving rescue breaths with the bag valve mask, helping him breathe since he couldn't do it adequately on his own. She kept her fingers on his pulse, monitoring constantly, ready to start CPR again instantly if needed. "Talk to me," Tom said, needing to understand the situation. "What's his condition?" Emma kept her voice calm and professional. "His heart is beating again, which is excellent. But he's still unconscious and his breathing is inadequate. I'm supporting his breathing with the bag mask. His pulse is weak but steady. He's very unstable. We need to get him to a hospital immediately. When we land, he'll need to go straight to a cardiac catheterization lab. They'll need to figure out what caused the arrest and fix it." "How much longer can you keep him stable?" Tom asked. "As long as I need to," Emma said simply. "How far out are we?" 15 minutes to landing," Tom replied. 15 minutes. Emma could do 15 minutes. She had to. She continued supporting the captain's breathing, squeezing the bag mask every few seconds to force air into his lungs. She watched his chest rise and fall. She monitored his pulse. She watched his color. He remained unconscious, but he was alive. His heart kept beating. That was what mattered. The plane began its descent toward Chicago. Emma could feel the change in altitude. Her ears popped. The engine's pitch changed. "Chicago approach, flight 428 with you, descending to 10,000, Tom radioed. "Flight 428, Chicago approach, radar contact. Continue descent to 5,000. You're cleared direct to O'Hare. Emergency equipment is standing by. Winds are 310 at 12 knots. You'll be landing runway 28 left. How is your patient?" Tom looked at Emma. She gave him a thumbs up while continuing to bag the captain. "Patient is critical but stable," Tom reported. "We have a cardiac nurse on board providing advanced life support. Patient has a pulse but is unconscious." "Roger, flight 428. Excellent work. Medical team will board immediately upon your arrival. You're number one for the airport. All other traffic is being held." The approach continued. Emma could see out the front windscreen now. The Chicago skyline was visible in the distance. They were getting close. 10 minutes, Tom announced. Emma's arms ached. Her back screamed. But she kept going. Breathe for the captain. Monitor his pulse. Watch for any change. Be ready to start CPR again if needed. The captain's color was marginally better now. The blue-gray was fading to a less alarming pale color. His pulse was steadier. His breathing was still weak, but the bag mask was providing enough oxygen. You're doing great, Captain, Emma said softly to the unconscious man. Just hang on a little longer. We're almost there. 5 minutes to landing. The plane was low now. Emma could see buildings and cars and roads below. The airport was visible ahead. Flight 428, you're cleared to land runway 28 left. Wind 310 at 15, gusting to 20. Cleared to land 28 left, flight 428, Tom acknowledged. Emma braced herself, still maintaining the bag mask rhythm. She wedged her knee against the center console to keep herself stable. The runway rushed up to meet them. Tom was flying perfectly despite the incredible stress he was under. The wheels touched down smoothly. They were on the ground. Nice landing, Emma said to Tom. Tom managed a small, stressed smile. Thanks. I was motivated. The plane slowed and turned off the runway. Emergency vehicles were everywhere. Fire trucks. Ambulances. Police cars. All with lights flashing. The moment the plane stopped, the door opened and paramedics swarmed in. There were 4 of them, carrying equipment, moving with practiced efficiency. What do we have? The lead paramedic asked Emma. Emma gave a rapid, concise report. She had given hundreds of these reports to incoming paramedics and doctors. Male, approximately 52 years old. Witnessed cardiac arrest approximately 18 minutes ago. He was down for roughly 12 minutes before we achieved return of spontaneous circulation. I administered 2 doses of epinephrine at appropriate intervals. The AED delivered 3 shocks. He currently has spontaneous pulse and weak respiratory effort. I've been supporting ventilation with bag valve mask. For access is established in the left forearm. He's been unconscious throughout. No spontaneous movement or response to stimuli. The paramedics were clearly impressed. This nurse had done everything perfectly. They quickly transferred the captain from his seat to their stretcher. They connected him to their cardiac monitor. They took over ventilation with their equipment. They moved him out of the plane with smooth, practiced efficiency. Emma watched them go. Her whole body was shaking now. The adrenaline was wearing off. The exhaustion was crashing back over her like a wave. She had done it. She had kept Captain Chen alive. Now it was up to the hospital team. Sarah helped Emma out of the cramped cockpit. Emma's legs felt weak. She had been kneeling and standing in awkward positions for nearly 20 minutes. Her knees hurt. Her back hurt. Her arms felt like jelly. But she was smiling. Tom came out of the cockpit. He looked at Emma and his eyes filled with tears. You saved his life, he said, his voice breaking. If you hadn't been here, if you hadn't helped. He couldn't finish the sentence. Emma put her hand on his arm. You did amazing too. You kept everyone safe and got us here. That was incredible flying under incredible pressure. But I couldn't help him, Tom said. I couldn't do anything. I had to just sit there and fly while he was dying. You did exactly what you needed to do, Emma said firmly. You got us on the ground. You got him to help. That's what saved him. The passengers were being deplaned now. As Emma walked through the cabin toward the exit, people started clapping. Then more people joined in. Soon everyone was applauding, many with tears in their eyes. Thank you, an elderly woman said, grabbing Emma's hand. God bless you. You're a hero, a businessman sighed. Thank you for saving the captain, a little girl said, looking up at Emma with wide eyes. Emma felt overwhelmed. She hadn't done this for recognition or applause. She had done it because someone needed help and she had the skills to provide it. But the gratitude was touching anyway. As she exited the plane, airline officials were waiting. The ground supervisor, a woman in her 50s, immediately came up to Emma. Ms. Martinez? I'm Janet Torres, the station supervisor. Thank you so much for what you did. We have a hotel room arranged for you. All your expenses are covered. We'll get you on a flight to Los Angeles first thing tomorrow morning. Is there anything at all that you need? Just some water and maybe some ibuprofen, Emma said with a tired smile. My arms are pretty sore. Of course. We'll take care of everything. Emma was taken to a quiet room in the airport. She sat down on a comfortable chair and finally allowed herself to relax. Her phone had 17 missed calls. Her mother, worried because the flight hadn't arrived in Los Angeles. Emma called her back. Emma. Thank God. I saw on the news that your flight diverted to Chicago for a medical emergency. Are you okay? Emma took a deep breath. I'm fine, Mom. Actually, I'm the reason we diverted. She told her mother the whole story. About hearing the announcement. About almost not helping. About standing up. About running to the cockpit. About doing CPR for nearly 20 minutes at 35,000 feet and then on the ground. Her mother was crying by the end. Baby, I'm so proud of you. You saved someone's life. I almost didn't, Mom, Emma admitted. I almost just sat there. I was so tired. I just wanted to rest. But you didn't sit there, her mother said. When it mattered, you stood up. That's who you are, Emma. That's my daughter. That night, Emma couldn't sleep despite her exhaustion. She kept thinking about Captain Chen. Was he okay? Had he survived? Did he have brain damage from the minutes without oxygen? She called the hospital where he had been taken. After some convincing, a nurse in the cardiac ICU agreed to give her an update. He's alive, the nurse said. He's in our ICU right now. They did an emergency cardiac catheterization and found a complete blockage in his left anterior descending artery. They put in a stent and opened it up. He's sedated right now, but his vital signs are stable. The doctor said his prognosis is actually pretty good, thanks to the excellent CPR he received. You saved his life, whoever you are. I'm the nurse who did the CPR, Emma said softly. Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you so much. He's going to make it because of you. Emma hung up and cried. Relief, exhaustion, emotion, it all came pouring out. Captain Chen was going to survive. He was going to be okay. All that effort, all that pain, all that fear, it had been worth it. 3 days later, Emma received a call from the hospital. Captain Chen was awake and asking to meet her. Emma flew back to Chicago. She walked into the cardiac ICU, a place that felt like home to her. She understood all the beeps and alarms. She knew what all the equipment did. This was her world. Captain Chen was sitting up in bed. He had a nasal cannula providing oxygen. He had 4 lines and monitor leads. But he was awake. Alert. Smiling. You must be Emma, he said as she entered. Hi, Captain Chen, Emma said. How are you feeling? Alive, thanks to you, he said. His voice was hoarse but strong. They told me what you did. They said you did CPR on me for 20 minutes. They said you saved my life. I just did what I was trained to do, Emma said. No, Captain Chen said firmly. You did more than that. You were off duty. You were on vacation. You had every right to stay in your seat and let someone else handle it. But you didn't. You chose to help. You chose to save a stranger. His wife, sitting next to his bed, reached out and took Emma's hand. Thank you for giving me my husband back. Thank you for letting our kids still have their father. You gave us a miracle. Emma stayed for an hour, talking with them. Captain Chen told her about his life. His 3 grown children. His 2 grandchildren. His love of flying. His plans for retirement in a few years. All the life he still had ahead of him because Emma had stood up. When Emma finally left the hospital, she felt different. Lighter somehow. The exhaustion and burnout she had been feeling seemed less important now. She understood something fundamental: being a nurse wasn't just her job. It was her identity. It was who she was at the most basic level. She couldn't separate Emma the person from Emma the nurse. They were the same. And that was okay. In fact, it was more than okay. It was a gift. 2 months later, Emma was back at work in the cardiac ICU at City Hospital. She was taking care of a man who had just been admitted with a heart attack. Am I going to be okay? The man asked, fear in his eyes. Emma held his hand and smiled. Yes. You're going to be okay. I've seen people come back from this. I've seen them recover completely. You're in good hands. And as she said it, she thought about Captain Chen. She thought about seat 12B. She thought about the moment she had stood up and decided to help. She had made the right choice that day. And she knew that if it happened again, she would make the same choice every single time. Because that's who she was. That's who she would always be. Emma Martinez. Nurse. Lifesaver. The woman in seat 12B who stood up when it mattered most.